All right, let's get into a topic today that really pushes the boundaries of what we think we know about international law. We're going to do it through a hypothetical scenario, but one that raises some very real and very tricky legal questions.
So let's just put it right out there, the central question. Is it ever actually legal to kill the leader of another country? Now, you might think there's a simple yes or no answer to that, but there really isn't. It's a total maze of treaties, historical precedents, and a whole lot of debate over definitions.
To really unpack this, let's set a scene. Imagine it's early March 2026. The United States and Israel launch a joint operation, a war on Iran, and it all kicks off with a massive strike that kills Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And just like that, with that one single act, a whole cascade of legal questions comes flooding in.
Okay, so the very first piece of the puzzle we have to solve is all about the person who was targeted. Was the Ayatollah a civilian, or was he a military figure? Because under the laws of war, that distinction means everything.
In some ways, the laws of war draw some pretty bright lines. I mean, targeting a purely civilian official, somebody with no military role, like a health minister, that's just flat out unlawful. But on the other side of that coin, you've got uniformed military commanders and soldiers. They are considered lawful targets. The problem is, what happens when a leader doesn't fit neatly into either of those boxes?
And that brings us to this really key term, hybrid status. This is what we use to describe a leader like Ayatollah Khamenei. He was a civilian cleric, for sure, but he was also the supreme commander of Iran's entire military. The US president has the same kind of status, a civilian who was also the commander-in-chief. And this is exactly where things start to get legally messy.
So here's the bottom line on that. Most legal experts would agree that a leader with this kind of hybrid status is probably a legitimate military target, but, and you've got to see the giant asterisk here, that's only true during an act of war. Now think back to our hypothetical. The strike that killed the leader was the act that started the war. So you see the problem, right? It's a real chicken and egg situation. So let's follow that thread. If the war hadn't officially begun, then the strike needs a whole different justification. And that shifts our focus away from who the target was and onto the legality of the attack itself. Specifically, we have to look at the idea of self-defense under international law.
The United Nations Charter is really the rule book here, and it's incredibly clear. You cannot use force on another country's turf without their permission. End of story. There are really only two main ways around that rule. Either you get the green light from the UN Security Council, or you are acting in self-defense against an armed attack.
This brings us to what might be the single most debated word in this entire legal field: imminent. To justify a preemptive strike, to hit first and call it self-defense, you have to prove you're responding to an imminent threat. But what does that really mean? How close does the danger have to be knocking at your door? In our scenario, the first reason given for the strike is pretty broad. The hypothetical statement from President Trump talks about eliminating imminent threats, but then connects it to Iran's potential to build nuclear weapons and missiles. That's a long-term threat, right? Not necessarily an immediate one. It's a very, very elastic definition of the word imminent.
Then a second justification pops up that's even more complex. It's almost circular. The argument basically goes like this. We thought Israel was going to attack Iran, and we believed Iran would then retaliate against us, so we joined the initial attack to stop that retaliation from ever happening. I mean, is it really self-defense if you're defending against a reaction to an attack you're also taking part in? It's a real head-scratcher.
Okay, so beyond all the international law, there's a whole separate legal battle going on right inside the United States government. And this one is all about who has the power, who has the authority to take the country to war in the first place.
And here's the fundamental tension. On one side, you have the U.S. Constitution. It gives the power to declare war to Congress, and only Congress. But on the other side, you've got this long history, especially since World War II, of presidents from both parties arguing that as commander-in-chief, they have the authority to launch limited military strikes all on their own.
You can really see this push and pull playing out over the decades. After 1945, presidential power just kept growing. Then, in 1973, Congress tried to pull that power back with the War Powers Resolution. For the big conflicts, like the war on al-Qaeda, presidents still went to Congress for authorization. But this hypothetical 2026 war with Iran, that would be one of the biggest unilateral military actions a president has taken in modern history.
Now, as if this wasn't all complicated enough, we've got to add one final critical piece to this legal puzzle. The United States has an official, explicit ban on assassination. So, the big question is, does this strike count as an illegal assassination?
Here it is, the exact words from Executive Order 12333, which has been around in some form since the 70s. It seems so direct, right? No person shall engage in assassination. Case closed, you'd think. Well, not quite.
The whole challenge is how you interpret it. First of all, the order never actually defines what an assassination is. Second, the government's argument for a long time has been that this ban just doesn't apply to the lawful killing of an enemy during a war. And third, and this is a really big one, there's a huge legal difference between targeting a non-state terrorist leader and targeting the recognized head of a sovereign country.
So after pulling on all of these different threads, the one thing that becomes crystal clear is that, well, nothing is clear at all. Figuring out if it's legal to kill a foreign leader isn't as simple as looking up one rule in a book. It's about navigating this dense, overlapping, and often contradictory web of international law, American constitutional debates, and decades of political history.
And all of this leaves us with a final and pretty sobering question. If the lines can blur this much, if the leader of a sovereign country can be labeled a legitimate target outside of a formally declared war, it really forces you to ask, in modern conflict, where does the battlefield truly begin and where does it end?